is Butch Vig Drums from Native Instruments for Kontakt. And this features production-ready drum sounds, so you can just load up the kit that you want, play in a pattern, or use the included patterns in here, and you have your drum kit, your drum track pretty much already done. Now you can pick this up right over here. You can buy it on its own or get it as part of Complete 13, which of course is a better deal overall. So this instrument is based, of course, on the drum sounds of Butch Vig, who's known for Nirvana, Smashing Pumpkins, and others. Scroll down here. You can see there are 468 total sounds, 21 kits, 336 MIDI files, and it's only 174 megabytes in size. Now it will run in the full version of Kontakt or the free Kontakt Player. Once you buy it and install it, you'll find it here in Kontakt under Libraries. Right here it is, expand it. There is your single instrument, drag it in or double click to load it up. So now we'll go over the interface and we're going to go through each and every page here, all of the different settings. There's a lot in here, but we'll keep it as concise as possible. So here on the main page, you can see your pad layout right there. We can click to audition any of our sounds. Across the bottom here, you have your macro knobs, and your macro knobs are going to adjust several parameters with just one turn of a knob. If we head over to the macros page, you can see that this grunge macro is adjusting all of these different parameters here with just this one turn of this knob. Now you can set up your own macros. We'll check that out as well. So if I want more grunge on that, let me just play a pattern, add more grunge, more saturation, reverb, delay, etc., etc. Over here, you have your master tune, and this is going to tune the entire kit. Tune everything down or tune everything up. I'm going to control click to set that back to the default. And this button right here, it's kind of hard to see, but this is a button right here. And this is the tune quantization toggle. So essentially what this means is as I adjust this tune, it's locked to semitones, as you can see. If I turn that to just this straight line, now whenever I use my tune, I can actually tune in between semitones. So that's all that does. Then over here, you have a level, pretty self-explanatory. This is the master level output for the entire kit. Now down here, we have some colored keys. These multicolored keys are the one-shots or the individual drum sounds. And as I hover over them, you can actually see what they are. That is provided you have the information section turned on. If you don't, come up here, make sure you turn on info. And then whenever I hover over these keys or over a control, you can actually see what it does right down here. So our colored keys, again, are the individual drum hits. Of course, play that on your keyboard. Or our purple keys, and these correspond to the patterns that are loaded whenever you load up a kit. So here's the patterns that are contained within this kit. And a pattern is a full MIDI pattern. Just click and hold. It will play through. We can also drag these patterns into our DAW, which we'll look at in just a second. Then up here, we have our presets or our snapshots, our kits. If you will, click that, choose the one that you want. And this is going to load different macros, different drum sounds, different patterns, etc., etc. And you'll also notice these BPM tags next to each of our snapshots. Now you can load any snapshot that you want into, any tempo session that you have. So I have an 87 BPM tempo here in Studio One. I can still load a 136 BPM snapshot. And that 136 BPM just denotes the original BPM of the patterns that are included in that snapshot. But of course, whenever you play back a pattern, it's not going to play back at the 136. It's going to play back at whatever the tempo is for your session. Right, that's 87 BPM. You can also use these arrows to go through your snapshots. And you can also find your snapshots right up here in Kontakt. Just make sure your camera icon is showing. Use your drop down and load them up. What you see here will be exactly the same as what you see over here. And this is also where you will save your own user presets. So once you set up a kit just how you like it, come through here, you can actually change out drum sounds, drum samples for each of your pads, set up your effects, insert effects, global effects, send effects, and all of your macros. Once you do that, make sure you click this save icon, give it a name, and save your snapshot. That way you can recall it whenever you want. All right, so that is the main page. Let's move on to the kit page. So over here in the kit page, you see we have our grid laid out, all of our pads laid out, all of the sounds. Click to hear them. If this button is turned on, you can use your MIDI keyboard to actually select the pad that's loaded up over here for the sample, the one that you want to work on. If that's turned off, it's not going to change, it's not going to update, so you'll have to actually click it. You can also mute and solo any of these pads. So if you're playing a pattern, you just want to solo the kick or mute the kick, etc., you can do that as well. And you'll also see the key that each of those sounds, each of those pads corresponds to. I'll select the snare here, and our sample updates over here. You're going to see an RR that stands for round robin. That just means a different sample will play as we're playing that multiple times. If that's turned off, then it ends up playing the same sample. Generally, you'll have round robin on if it's an option for that sample. And again, you can always look down here to read exactly what these things do. If I want to change out a sample for a pad, I can double click the pad, or I can have it loaded up over here. I can just click the name. I'm in the snare category right now. I can go through these just by clicking them. Say I like that, double click it, and that changes the sample that's in that pad. So you can go through here and you can really set up whatever you want. So we're in the kick category. If I don't want a kick right there, no problem. I can turn it into a hi-hat, a crash, a ride, misc category, effects, a clap, tom, whatever I want. So double click, and now that is a tom. I'll come back here, change it back to a kick. That's pretty cool. Load that one up. You can also click the magnifying glass icon right there to get to your browser, or just use these arrows to switch through your samples for each pad. Down here, you have a choke group. So let's go to these two symbols here, for example. So our choke group is going to choke off the sound of another pad, another sample, right? Whenever it plays. Put this on A. We'll put this on A as well. So now whenever I play this sample, this pad, and then this one, you can hear that they get cut off. I could do the same thing for this tom. I could put it on A, for example, play the crash, play this tom, and then that crash gets choked out. So set that up if you want to, have cymbals choke out, or even snares or toms choke out. We'll get to the output section here in just a second. Let's come back to our kick. So we have a pitch control again for every single sample here. We have the same controls, right? So on our kick, change the pitch of just the kick. Control click, put it back to the center. Use your volume to level things out. So if my kick is too low, make it louder, make the snare quieter, etc. If I want to pan things around, so our toms are panned around, as you can see. Pan things around however you want. Then down here we have some velocity controls and a button right here. And both of these controls are active at all times, even if only one is showing. So we have our velocity curve here. Again, read down there about what it does. So this keyboard within Kontakt is velocity sensitive. If I play way down here, it's a low velocity, up here is a high velocity. I take my velocity curve down, very low velocity, still very low velocity, and then way up here is finally a higher velocity. Same thing if I'm playing on my keyboard. I really have to hit it hard in order to get a high velocity. And this also carries over to any MIDI that you already have in your DAW, okay? And again, this is per pad, per sound. If it's way up here, on the other hand, then I'm getting a high velocity very easily. Let's put this somewhere in the middle. Let's switch over here to velocity to amp, or to the amplitude to the overall volume is essentially what that means. So right now it's on 100%. So the velocity is going to affect the output volume, which makes sense. So again, lower velocity, getting lower volume. Okay. Higher velocity, getting more volume. But on the other hand, if I take this all the way down here and then I play a low velocity, I'm still getting a high volume, right? You can use that to customize how your drums respond to your personal playing style, to your keyboard, to your MIDI pad, or again, to any MIDI that is already in your DAW. Then you have attack, hold, and decay, all basic things. Let's head over here to the snare. If my attack is up here, of course, we're going to lose the initial transient. It kind of slides in, right? Then our hold. So how long do we want to hold that? Hold it along. Let's put the attack back down here. Or don't hold it at all. Now it's just cutting off. Right? And then the decay of that, how long is it going to decay? It's not decays for a while. Or down here, just cuts off. All right? Or I can just turn all of these off and it will be the actual sample. Then you have a low pass and a high pass. Go back to our kick. So if I want to cut out either low end or top end, do that with this control here. Low pass, cut out the top end. All right, so you can shape your drums, each and every one of them, with your low pass and your high pass. And now we'll look at the output section. And this is where you can set up multiple outputs if you want. You can also route drums to bypass the master effects. So by default, every one of our sounds is going out of just the default output, which is going to be 1, 2. Let's bring up the outputs right here. Okay. So no matter what I play, everything comes out of 1, 2 here. Everything comes out of 1, 2 over here in our DAW as well. And that may be what you want if you're going to do all of your effects within Kontakt here. All right. But you also have the option to send any of your pads to bypass the master effects, and it will still come out of output 1, 2. So if I bypass the master effects just for the kick, it's going to bypass the global effects here. So this entire chain will be bypassed, but just for the kick. Let me put a wah on there, pull the output way up so you can really hear that, right? Of course, the global effects literally affect everything. So no matter what I play, it's going through this entire chain. Again, we'll come back to kit and we'll route the kick around the master effects. But the snare, hi-hats, toms, etc. are still affected by the master effects. Okay. So you have that option again for each and every pad. But if you want to set up multiple outputs, individual outputs for each of these pads, you can do that as well. And you do it over here in the same area. So use your drop down and then choose the proper output. Now you may not see this if you don't already have the outputs set up within Kontakt. So you actually have to do that first. Again, head up here, make sure you show your outputs. And if I put this on the default, this may be what your system looks like. And then you'd have to come in here and hit the plus, add the quantity of tracks. So that's the actual number of tracks. The number of channels is the number of channels per track. 2 would be a stereo track. 1 would be a mono track. Above that would be like a surround track or something, right? So if you wanted, 16 tracks, stereo tracks, we could just come in here and do 16 stereo tracks. We could connect them right here, but you can also do that later. Hit OK. And then there is all of your tracks. You can head in here and name them, kick, snare, etc., etc. And then you can set up the output before that. So these are already routed properly, 7, 8, but you may have to come through here and change some of these around. And then set all of those up in Kontakt so you can actually use them within Butch Vig Drums and your DAW. As you can see, please close and reopen all plugin instances before those changes become effective. So you will have to close down your project and reopen it before Studio One recognizes these changes. All right, but I already have all of this set up right here on my 14 outputs right there. Have everything set up. Now, if you shut down your session, you reopen it, and Studio One or Pro Tools still doesn't recognize your changes, or Kontakt didn't save your changes, once you set up your outputs here within Kontakt, come back to this drop down and come to Save Current Output Section State as Default 4, and then choose the proper plugin version, or just do all formats. Okay, so you need to save it. In this case, I would save it for a VST plugin or for all formats. You may want to save a preset as well. Okay, so now that we have our outputs actually set up, then Butch Vig Drums will recognize them. So now I can come to my output and I can route this to, say, 1 right there, which I actually don't want. I actually want this on 2. I can also name these. If I want this to be the kick, I can make that the kick. I can make this the snare, etc., etc., right? So then come to your snare and we'll put that on 2. Maybe I want this on 4, and I want this hi-hat also on 4. And then maybe I want everything else to keep going through 1 and 2, or you want to set up your toms to have individual tracks, but you want all of your cymbals to stay going through 1 and 2. You can set this up any way that you want. But now that I have my kick set up to go out of the stereo 2 channel, which I renamed to kick, we actually don't hear anything, right? Don't hear anything. That's because you have to set that up in your DAW. And this is going to be different depending on the DAW that you have. Here in Studio One, just make sure I have my instruments showing there. This is one way to do it. Expand this. I can also come up here and click this button, and then I can actually assign those channels there as well. But in here, I can assign these outputs, and I get new tracks, individual tracks. So now when I play the kick, I can actually hear it. Play the snare, I can actually hear it. You can see it come out of these channels here. Separate channels. And then over here, individual channels for that. And that means that now I can head into my effects and I can load up my favorite effects, any effects that you want on these individual tracks, right? I can load this over here just for the kick. I can load this just for the snare, etc., etc. And then you can mix like you have recorded a real drum kit with microphones. Now, also, whenever you route your drums to these individual outputs, you will be bypassing the master effects up here. So your global effects. If I turn that cry wah back on and I trigger my kick, you're not hearing it, right? If I trigger my tom, you're hearing that wah because it's coming through the 1, 2 there. That is another way to bypass your global effects. Things like your send effects and your insert effects will, of course, still be active, and the send effects will be coming through 1 and 2. So if I turn, for example, this reverb way up here, and I come back to my kit, and I make sure my send level for this kick is really high, the reverb is still coming through our stereo 1 channel. Okay. So now we'll look at the effects. And from this kit page, we can see our insert effects. I can also load an insert effect. And again, you can do this per pad. So I'm just on the kick here. If I move over to the snare, you can see that screamer is not loaded. Okay. You can have up to 4 insert effects per pad. You can move these around in the chain wherever you want. You can turn them on and off, bypass them, or turn them on or off. You can click this edit button right here, and that will take you over to the effects page, to the insert effects page. You can also get to that by just coming over here to effects, click that. And since we're dealing with the insert effects right here, and then choose the pad, the sound that you want to work with. So we're on the kick. Here's our screamer. We can adjust all of those parameters right here. We can load more effects over here, put a distortion on that. Check it out. Bypass it. Okay. You can also bypass all of your effects by clicking this button right here. That bypasses all of your insert effects, your global effects, and your send effects. So all of those now are just the raw samples. Turn the effects back on. Okay. Back to your insert effects. Again, if I want to work on the snare, click that, drop down, load up whatever effect that you want, position it in the chain. Of course, the first effect is going to be processed first, all the way through the chain there. You can also come over here and you can do things like save an effects unit preset. So if I have the perfect screamer preset set up here, I can save that. I can load a unit preset. I can save an entire chain of effects over here, or load an entire chain of effects. I can reset a unit. So reset the screamer unit. Let's change this a little bit more, and then reset the unit. Okay. And then you can also clear an effects unit. So this screamer, in this case, clear that unit. Over to the distortion. Let's come back here and load up a couple things. And then I can also clear the entire chain. So clear the entire chain. All of those effects are gone for this selected pad. Okay. You can also select the sound you're working on with MIDI. Again, that familiar icon right there. Press my MIDI controller. I can choose the pad that I want to work with. Then down here we have send levels for our send effects. Come over here to the effects page, send effects, and your send effects are going to be your reverb and your delay. Use these drop downs to choose the type of delay or reverb, and then click them to set them up, turn them on or off, etc., etc. We can change these settings to get just the sound that we want. And then back on the kit page, for each and every of our sounds, we can choose how much level we want to send to the reverb and to the delay. So in this case, send 1 is the reverb, send 2 is the delay. We can see that over here. This is the number 1 slot. This is the number 2 slot, right? So if you had this switched around with your delay over here, that would be number 1, and that would still be number 2. Let's put this back to some sort of a reverb there. Head back to our kit page. We're on our kick. Let's send some level to the reverb. Now we can hear it. Let's send some level to the delay. Now we can hear it. Head back to the effects. Turn up the overall return for that delay. Over to the snare. Maybe more reverb on that. Delay on that. Okay. And you can do that for each and every pad in here. Click the edit right there. Drops me back in here to my send effects. Same stuff over here. Save presets, load presets, reset the effect right there as well. So we'll head back to the effects page, and then we have global effects, and we sort of saw the global effects already. Of course, the global effects are going to affect everything you have, every single sound, unless of course you have that routed to a different output or you have bypassed the master effects. So same stuff over here. Here's your drop down, choose an effect, click on it to change it, turn effects on or off individually, turn everything off again right up there, save, load, reset right over here. Okay, so that is your effects section. And now we'll check out the patterns that are loaded with each snapshot. So head over to your patterns page. You can see the different patterns over here. And of course, these correspond to your notes down here, your purple notes. So I click and hold, you can see the progress of that. Right? Or I can just click one and it will play. Click another one, it will play. Up here we have speed. So if I want to play that back in half speed, and the half speed refers to whatever my tempo is, not the tempo, the original tempo assigned to the pattern. Okay. So if I change my tempo here to 120, for example, have that play on half speed, just click it right there, plays half speed for me. If I want it to play at the original speed, give it on ×1. And again, that original speed is my tempo and my DAW, right? If I change my tempo to 200. Okay, it's gonna play as such, take that down to 110, or play it back at double speed. Okay. We can also drag these patterns out into our DAW. So I can just grab them either by the target here, just drag it out, or just grab the name and drag it out right there. And then you can build up your track like that. Now, of course, whenever you're playing a pattern that you have dragged out, it's triggering the individual drum hits, right? As you can see. In the speed setting will also affect your patterns whenever you're dragging them out. So on ×1, if I drag something out, you can see how long that is. If I make it half speed, whenever I drag out that same pattern, of course, it's twice as long. Or if it's set to ×2, drag out the same pattern, and it's half as long. All right. So whenever you're playing back your patterns that you have dragged out or MIDI that you have played in, your speed setting will have no effect on those patterns as they're playing back. But again, it does affect the patterns as you're dragging them out, right? So even on ×2 here, I'm playing back this pattern, which is the original speed, okay? Half speed and ×2. Another way to play your patterns is to, of course, trigger them with the notes here. So if I wanted to record something in, let's just come up here and I'll record. I'll use my MIDI keyboard. That's all you have to do. As you can see, 2 notes, and we have all of this here. But you also have some other options in here as well. We have latch. So latch means whenever you click a key on your keyboard or even in here, it's going to latch that pattern on. So it's going to keep playing, right? If you turn latch off, click and hold, release, the pattern stops, right? Latch on. Just going to keep playing until I trigger a different pattern or click that same pattern again to turn it off. And this also has consequences to the way you program your drums in your DAW or to the way that you play them in. So for example, up here, I had to hold those keys for the length I wanted the pattern to play. If I had latch on, for example, I could record and then just tap the keys to change them. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll record here. I'll tap a key, not holding anything at all. Tap another key, tap another key, tap another key. Okay. Gonna keep playing until I turn it off. So now we have this here. We just have a few double clicks. You can see those notes a little bit better. So now we just have these 4 notes triggering different patterns. And that's because we have the latch turned on. So it just depends on how you want to program your drums or how you want to play your patterns in, either by clicking and holding the entire length you want them to play, or by latching and just clicking to switch them, or of course, as we already showed, just by grabbing them, which may be the best way, and just dropping them right into your DAW, and then you can edit those however you want, or of course, play in your own patterns as well. Now we also have a retrigger. So let's turn on latch for now. I'll trigger a pattern, and then another one, then another one, then another one, then another one. And as you can see, because I have retrigger on, it's starting from the beginning every single time, right? Every time I change the new loop, the new pattern starts from the very beginning. If I had retrigger off, trigger a loop, do another one, and it plays in time. Okay. So however you want that to behave, back to retrigger, it's going to start from the beginning. All right, so that is your latch and your retrigger, and those only correspond to the patterns, not to individual notes or to MIDI that you have dragged in to your DAW. Okay, unless of course that MIDI is like this here and you're triggering, you're triggering patterns. Of course, your latch will make a big difference there, because if I didn't have latch on and I play this, we're only going to get the pattern for as long as that note is held. All right. Then we have Quantize. So let's check this out. Let's go to latch for now. And for the Quantize to work, your transport has to be running. Okay. We'll do it on bar just so it's very apparent what is going on here. What we'll do is I'll take this note right here, this pattern. Actually move this up here. And then we'll come to say 13.4 and I'll put a note, a pattern in there. Okay. So then when we play back, let me move this over. You can see that it didn't actually change patterns until we got to this bar. So it's keeping everything locked to the grid. Okay, let me change this here. Maybe this here, maybe to a fill. There we go. And again, it's not going to switch until it gets to this bar, even though the pattern is triggered right here. There's a trigger, now the switch. And again, whenever you change your presets, your snapshots, you're going to load up different patterns as well. So different patterns in this one. We'll switch over to another one. Different patterns over here, different sounds over here, right? So that is your pattern section, how to work with your patterns either within Butch Vig Drums here, or by dragging them out and then editing them to your heart's content. Now there is another thing, another way that you could work with the MIDI that is included with Butch Vig Drums, and that is to head into your file system wherever you have Butch Vig Drums installed, which is right here. Head into your MIDI files and then you'll see them right there. Now you don't see a lot of MIDI files, and that's because these are like entire songs. Okay, let me show you what I mean. If I just drag one in from the file system, we're going to end up getting the intro 2, intro fill, etc., etc. Okay. So if you wanted to go through your MIDI like that, you could do that. Just drag them in, squeeze this down, and then, pull things over and Audition MIDI that is from, from different kits without having to actually go through those kits. But another way to do this, if your DAW allows it, is to head into the file system, into the browser within your DAW, and then dial down into that folder from within your DAW, and then we can see those same exact MIDI files right here. But then, at least here in Studio One, I can expand those and I can get the individual MIDI files right there. Now within Studio One here, I can actually preview. So I can hear the gray velvet MIDI on the disruptor kit, or drag in just the individual MIDI tracks from here as well. Okay, so that's another thing that you might want to check out if you have Studio One or some other similar DAWs that lets you really dive in to your MIDI like that. All right, let's check out the last section here, the macros. So your macros are going to allow you to make several adjustments of a lot of different parameters of effects, for example, or things over here in your kit with just one knob movement. You can set up your macros however you want. You can grab them, move them around. We can rename them. If I don't want this to be called filter, I can double click and call it hello if I wanted to. So within your macros, each of your macros, let's switch our kits real quick here. So within each macro, you have multiple slots, up to 24 different slots that you can assign. So let's look at this grunge slot, for example. If I look at number 1 and I click this icon right there, it's going to take me right to that macro, what it is assigned to, okay? Head back to your macros. If I wanted to remove a macro, I could just click the X, and that will get rid of the assignment in that slot. We have a minimum and maximum for each of our different slots here. So let's look at this number 4 here, pad 1 pitch. And if I click that, it takes me over to this kick. And here's the macro right there, is this pitch right here. So let's check out exactly what this does. Again, we're on the grunge, we're on this pitch. So I move this here. Let's check this out, see what happens. So we can see that the pitch is changing right there. Now it's not changing very much, and that's because of the minimum and maximum parameters right there. If I had the minimum over here and the maximum over here, then we come back to the kit. I change the grunge, and now we can see there's much more of a change. So you can constrain each slot with this minimum and maximum. Same thing for pitch 2. Head over there. You can see that very tiny change there. Back to macro. I can adjust this however I want, again, per slot. So this can become extremely powerful, extremely complicated if you want it to. Come back here to pad pitch 4. Let's put this on minimum and maximum, the full throw of that. Then we have a shaper grid here, a macro shaper grid. What does this do? Well, right now we have this essentially going from 0 all the way up to 100. Let me put that back on initialize. And if we head back here, come over here, you can see exactly how that pitch follows along with this grunge knob. But if I did something like this, what if I started out on about 100 and then came down to 0? Well, now we're going to have the opposite movement. So now I take my grunge here, and now we're getting the opposite movement, right? So my grunge is on this side, the pitch is on that side. Now it's on the other side. So we can change how our macros affect each and every parameter. If I wanted to maybe draw in something strange like this, you could do that as well. And then look at it over here, and you can see those movements there as it switches back and forth as I turn the grunge knob. The same macro is assigned to the snare, and we have completely different movement on that. Okay. Same for this one here. Much different movement on that. So you can go through here, make things as complicated as you want, or as simple as you want. So we have some presets in here for our shaper. You can save and load there as well. Go to soften, quantize, randomize, etc., etc. We'll just put this back to initialize. You can use your adjustments here, left, right, up, and down. And you also have some modifier keys, as you can see there, command or control, shift, click, to make adjustments as well. Put this back to initialize, and then you have this little line, this shaper smoothing toggle. Now, this sounds a little bit complicated, but really it's just it just adds a little bit of transition movement. So let me show you exactly what I mean here. I'll draw in full 100% here, and then right here we'll go down to 0%. Okay, and we'll have that turned off. So we just have these steps right there. Use my grunge knob. We'll go over to this very last step, which is on 100%. Again, we're on the pad 1 pitch. Keep in mind, you can set this up for each and every slot, okay? Each and every parameter. Come back over here to the kit. We're on this kick right here. So because our macro shaper is on 100%, right? Whenever this grunge is pulled to this side, the pitch is dimed all the way out, right? You can see that. Pull this grunge again, back up to this very last 100% step, right? Again, look at where that pitch is. Very good. I'm going to take this grunge one more step, and now it's on 0, right? So we come back to the kit, and now the pitch is on the other side. That's because the other side is 0, right? So right down here, it's on 100% for the shaper. Right down here, it's on 0%. But if we turn on the smoother, watch what happens? Let's move this back now to right before the final step. So again, we're on 100%. Come back here. The pitch is completely dimed out. Okay. Move it one more step to the final 100% in our shaper. Come back here. And now our pitch, it's not dimed out on either side now. It's somewhere in between. So the movement has been smooth, right? Again, even though the step that it's on is set to be 100%, because we have, put that back there, because we have the smoothing on, it's adding some transition to that movement. So it's not quite as stark, okay? And then whenever you get to 0, of course, it's going to be fully over here. So that's all your smoothing does. It just adds some transition movement between each of these steps. So it's not quite as a stark difference in those changes, okay? Now, what if you wanted to add things to any of these slots, set up your own macros? Well, you can do that, of course. We'll say, we'll come to this saturation. Don't have anything assigned right here. What do we have assigned so far? Let's just click this here. And we have our saturation effect assigned. We can see both of those things are affected by this one knob. Go over here to tape saturation. Maybe I want to add something over here from tape saturation to our saturation macro. Not a problem. Maybe I want to add the high frequency roll off. So to add a macro, just click any of the colored buttons, then click A control. And there we go. Now it is assigned. We can constrain it right here. And there you go. Now it is assigned. You can also head back to your macros over here, and now you can see it right there. And you can further customize how each macro is going to work. There, we'll come back here. You can see how that high frequency roll off is now adjusting with our saturation macro. Okay, and you can assign whatever you want. So I can assign, filters, other effects, whatever I want really. So we're on the global effects right now. If I wanted to add the tone to that, I can do that. If I wanted to do something over here in the send effects, I can do that. Insert effects, to load one up first, of course. I can, of course, do that as well. Okay. If I wanted to add something over here with any of these controls, maybe this percussion, saturation, put it on pan, constrain it wherever I want, something like that. And then with this one adjustment of my saturation, we're getting all of these different movements. As you can see, the screamer, high frequency roll off, this wah effect, etc., etc. All right, so you can set up your own macros. Again, make them as simple or as complicated as you want. Rearrange them, rename them. Just double click down here, name them whatever you want. And you can access your macros from any of these different pages. So they're always right at your fingertips. All right, so that is everything you could ever want to know about Butch Vig Drums. So now we're going to go through some of these presets, some of these snapshots, and check out how it sounds. So that is Butch Vig Drums, production-ready sounds from Native Instruments for Kontakt.